For our part, President Biden is restoring U.S. assistance programs that support economic development and humanitarian aid for the Palestinian people. Specifically, the United States is pleased to announce today $15 million in humanitarian assistance to support the most vulnerable communities in the West Bank and Gaza.
As you just heard, a few weeks ago, United States Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, announced the resumption of U.S. economic aid and humanitarian aid to the Palestinian Authority at that UN Security Council briefing. She said that the United States would give $15 million to vulnerable Palestinian Arab communities to help fight the COVID-19 pandemic. As if that wasn't enough, a day later, with no public announcement, the Biden administration notified Congress that it will give the Palestinian Authority $75 million more for economic support to be used in part to regain their trust and goodwill after the Trump-era cuts. Understand, all U.S. aid was stopped by the Trump administration because the Palestinian Authority was using money to fund terrorists. Now, let's understand the full context here. President Trump froze U.S. aid to the Palestinian Authority because the Palestinian Authority spends a third of its GDP on rewarding terrorists in a program that we like to call pay to slay, which means convicted terrorists who murdered Jews or innocent people are given a monthly stipend from the Palestinian Authority. And not just Jews, also non-Jews, like Americans who were murdered by Palestinian Authority terrorists, like U.S. veteran Stuart Force, who was murdered on a visit to Israel by a Palestinian Arab terrorist. Now, Biden reinstating financial aid to the Palestinian Authority without any demand for the Palestinian Authority to stop paying terrorists means that the Biden administration is complicit to murder and terror, enabling terror and funding terrorists. All this despite a United States law called the Taylor Force Act, which prohibits American money from going to the Palestinian Authority until they stop their incitement to terror and financial rewards to their murdering terrorists. That is still a congressional law, and this law was ignored by Biden and the anti-Israel activists in his administration. Congressman Doug Lamborn introduced this law to Congress. I had the personal opportunity to speak with Congressman Lamborn back in December 2017, right after it passed in Congress. Listen to what he has to say.
First of all, I want to say thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Congressman Lamborn introduced the Taylor Force Act. It just passed as a bipartisan bill yesterday on the House floor. It is huge. And I'm not trying to be Donald Trump-like. It really is a huge bill. So thank you. Why was it important for you to pass?
It's so important that we send a message to the Palestinians that if they reward terrorism, they're not going to get any more American taxpayer dollars. We need them to stop incentivizing terrorism, and we need to stop wasting U.S. taxpayer dollars. We're running a big deficit right now. We've got to get spending under control. So let's make our dollars really count for positive purposes, not allowing the PA to turn around and reward terrorists or their families if the terrorist gets killed in an attack by sending them all this money. You know, the money that they're giving to the stipends for terrorists or their families is more than they pay their entire civil service to run whatever government they have in the PA territory.
Now, as the one who introduced this bill, do you see this more as bringing an end to them sponsoring and funding terror, or more to America standing up and saying this is wrong, we're not going to be funding this anymore?
Those are two important issues. We at least need to make our own stand and do the right thing with our hard-earned taxpayer dollars. If they get the message and respond positively, that will be a step toward peace. That'll be a step toward stabilization. That'll be a step toward an ultimate reconciliation, which we all hope for in the Middle East.
Now, President Trump signed the Taylor Force Act into law back in March 2018. I also had the opportunity to speak with Stuart Force, Taylor's father. here in Israel after that law was signed into law by President Trump. Hi everybody, I am sitting here with Mr. Stuart Force. Anyone hopefully knows about the Taylor Force Act. Taylor Force was Mr. Force's son, and he was very involved in ensuring that the Taylor Force Act passed in America. And here in Israel, just yesterday, the Israeli version passed as well. So, Mr. Force, first of all, welcome to Israel. It is so nice having you here.
It is a good visit. Thank you very much. I felt nothing but welcome from the Israeli people.
It's unbelievable. Really, it's very special having you here. As an Israeli and as a Jew, I'm actually embarrassed that we had to wait for you and you taking upon yourself the project of passing the Taylor Force Act in order to bring America and Israel to try to finally stop money from being given to the Palestinian Authority while they're supporting and paying the terrorists who kill us and also killed your son. So thank you so much.
Well, you sort of have it wrong. It was not me. There were so many people that were behind this. Senator Gerber, Senator Graham, who introduced it in the Senate, and Doug Lamborn in the House. And you can't believe so much support that we've got from the Israeli community, government. People we've never met have come up and said we are behind it, and we realize what a good person your son is. And thank you for those things.
Can I ask you to take advantage of this opportunity to just tell us a little bit about Taylor?
You know, when people ask me, probably the easiest and most means a lot to a lot of people is when you see a glass of water on a table and you see it half full. Well, a pessimist will say it's half empty. An optimist will say it's half full. An engineer would say the glass is too big for the water. But Taylor's glass is full to the rim of life. And it's like I've experienced the same feeling here. That he embraced life, he embraced friends, and not in a party way, but just in a I want to be with you thing.
That's amazing. And how important is it to you that the Taylor Force Act was passed in America as well as in Israel? And to your wife?
And for us, it's given us a focus, and I hate to say our later years, but it's given us a chance to do something to demonstrate our love for our son and our daughter, who was our son's best friend. And it's been a journey, but we are glad that Israel and the United States and now Australia have accomplished the legislative process and done something, hopefully, that'll make Israel a safer place to visit, study, and live.
Well, again, I just want to say thank you on behalf of myself. I can't speak on behalf of the Jewish people or the state of Israel, but if I could, I would. And your son will definitely be remembered. We, thanks to the Taylor Force Act and the importance of the message that it gives to no, we're not going to pay our murderers to murder us anymore. We're always going to remember Taylor, and I look forward to learning more about Taylor and being able to put more information out there for people to learn about him as well.
Thank you, and this is you'll next time you see me in Israel, it'll be with my wife and my daughter.
Amazing.
I can hardly wait to come back.
Amazing. I look forward to welcoming you in Jerusalem again. And just wishing you and your family really the most happiness until the end of your days.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And just a word of inspiration for all of you, how you can be inspired. And this is a message I give over. Everyone has challenges, sickness, death. Everyone has challenges. Everyone has tragedies. And one thing that the forces, the lesson they give over to us is no matter how sad or how bad your tragedy, instead of just focusing on the sadness, of course there's sadness, it's taking that place of the sadness and then trying to use it to better yourself and everyone else around you. And that's a valuable lesson from you and your wife, so thank you.
You're entirely welcome. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
It is beyond disgraceful that President Biden and his administration are going against U.S. law and once again continuing to send aid to the Palestinian Authority, which is totally illegal. And I just want to end with Ned Price, the spokesperson for the State Department. In connection to the reinstating of this financial aid to the Palestinian Authority, Ned said this, quote, we continue to believe that American support for the Palestinian people, including financial support, is consistent with our values. It is consistent with our interests. Of course, it is consistent with the interests of the Palestinian people. It's also consistent with the interests of our partner, Israel." End quote. No, Ned. The Biden administration's reinstating financial aid to the Palestinian Authority is an absolute disgrace and illegal against U.S. law, and it spits on the grave of Taylor Force, a U.S. veteran. The Biden administration rewarding terror and supporting it with aid does no good for the Palestinian Arabs or to advance peace. In reality, it makes the lives of the Arabs who live under the Palestinian Authority even worse, because it entrenches the corrupt Palestinian Authority that does nothing for its own residents, and it pushes peace further away because the Palestinian Authority is getting the message from the Biden administration that they will continue to give them aid regardless of their support for terror. So why should they stop?
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.